sagt nur und hier der Nerd.
Ich krieg das gut, ja. Machen wir es eher auf Englisch oder was? Oder?
Ja.
Ja, sicher. Genau. Es kommt, ganz am Anfang kommt der Jingle, glaube ich. Der Teaser kommt dann, ja.
Mhm.
Die Position genau. Super, danke schön.
Gut. Was soll ich jetzt gleich was sagen oder kommt Trailer? Also dann bitte Trailer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to warmly welcome you and especially our best friend, nerd, moderator, the filmmaker and fantastic, great Austrian, Johannes Grenzfurthner. Very welcome.
Hello, thank you so much, Katharina, for the nice welcome. It's great to like being able to present something that I made and not as before ask people about the things they made. So like I'm changing the perspective now. I'm not asking people about their creative work. I'm showing you my creative work. So you are my victims now, because what you are going to see is, yes, it is a horror film. It's a horror drama, psychological horror drama, maybe even more than that. You will see. It is the Germany premiere. The world premiere of the film was like 3 weeks ago in Austin, Texas, at the Fantastic Fest, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, genre film festival on our rusty little planet. And I was, of course, flabbergasted why they would choose the film. And at the same time, of course, I was enormously flattered that I would have a premiere where usually people like James Cameron go to have premieres and stuff like that. So that was really something. I don't want to tell you too much about the film, but a very important information for the people in the live stream. Hello, people in the live stream. On the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog, so also dogs in the live stream. The problem is we are not live streaming the film, but the film is part of the B3 biennial virtual online platform. So after all my yada yada yada, you can actually go there, buy the film there for I think €5 or something like that. €5, like the boss. Herr Krake, €5, he knows it. So you can buy there, then you can watch the film together with us here live in Frankfurt. And then right after, I'll do a little bit of a Q&A, and then you can jump back into the stream and join the Q&A. So that's for the live stream people out there. And so the live stream people and dogs have some time to do that and get out their credit cards and all that stuff. A little bit of backstory about the film. I don't want to tell you too much. The story is that I'm usually a very humorous person. There is humor in the film, but it's not the main, let's call it, matter of content or like not the main carrier wave of the film, because it's really a horror film and it's a drama. And it's the first time I'm doing something like that, because usually I'm working in strange forms of comedy, but not in this case. And of course, you'll see that I'm dealing with some of my personal traumas, but maybe with some of your traumas too. And in general, it is a film by a nerd, me, about a nerd. And of course, it's not the nice nerd you want to meet, it's more like the dark nerd, but you will see that. to not give away too much, I would say the film is comparable to those internet YouTube videos where you see people on very icy roads in cars who try to brake, but they can't brake. And you just don't know how bad it is going to end. I think that's a good description of my film. Cars that try to brake, but you don't know where they crash into. So that's it. So we have for the local audience here a procedure. Could you, you know who I'm talking to, could you call the guys up there that they start the film on the projection screen here? That would be very nice. So we have probably another minute here. And for the people in the stream, I hope you already bought the film and are going to watch it now. So see you on the other side. Thank you. I. Das whip, whip, blop, blop, blop. Blop, 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 blop. Sie flüchten. Es stimmt, es stimmt.
Hallo, hallo? Na? Hallo, hallo? Hallo? Hallo, hallo? Hallo, hallo? Ciao, ciao.
Der Stream funktioniert auf jeden Fall auch ohne den Quatsch. Dann machen wir einfach ohne. Ja,
Aber Ton hörst du auf jeden Fall, also im Stream.
draußen. Hier drin hören wir dich erst so.
Ach so, na gut, dann ist ja vollkommen egal. Okay, solange die da draußen was hören vom Mikro. Na gut, okay. Okay, so the stream is working? Stream is on? Okay. So, not sure if anyone is still listening or watching out there. We had a couple of technical problems in the beginning of the whole screening, but I guess it works because the whole film is about a guy having problems. So that's and dealing with it in a very specific way. Let's call that way. But yes, just before, of course, I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say. First of all, I want to make, like, I just got reminded of it. A big B3 shout out and applause to Baram and Tina, who were really behind the scenes, like really doing incredible work. They were pretty much like the entire like technical team behind. Like I don't even know what they all did, but they did it until 4 o'clock in the morning every day. That's for you. That's for you. Das wäre der schlimmste Tinnitus. Aber nur das hören wir. Die ganze Zeit. Okay. Oh. Nice. There we go. Okay. Oh, but there was no applause yet. Applause for you guys. But because I did a lot of moderation and all, like I know what you had to go through, so it's well-deserved applause. Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, that was my film. It's my first horror film. You have seen it has elements of comedy, or at least very dark comedy, but not that much. But the backstory is that for many, many years, I'm not sure if you got the reference, but of course, the story that I wrote together with Samantha Lienhardt, and I contacted Samantha. She is a writer living in Pennsylvania, and I never met her in person. I actually never spoke with her. We wrote the thing, like I wrote the basic script, she worked over it, uh, and then I worked over it, and she worked over it. But basically, I asked her to join me in writing that thing because she is an incredible H.P. Lovecraft fan, and you might have gotten like the H.P. Lovecraft references in the film, because I'm not sure anyone here, except a couple of nerds, know H.P. Lovecraft, but H.P. Lovecraft is this very controversial in the meantime, of course, writer because he wrote his weird fiction, horror fiction in the early 20th century, and he's pretty much like a huge influence on the horror genre in general. Like if you read Stephen King, you feel kind of like the DNA of H.P. Lovecraft in that kind of contemporary horror stories. And the big thing about H.P. Lovecraft was, first of all, of course, he was a white middle upper class guy, WASP guy on the East Coast. He was very racist. He was terrified by white people being like the white gene pool. There were no genes back then, but the white pool of the white race would be intoxicated by other races and stuff like that. So he has definitely a very racist element in his writings. But many writers at that time had that, especially writers that dealt with that kind of fiction. But on the other hand, he was a very strange but also kind of brilliant scholar of very strange topics, and he all packed all of that stuff into his crazy writing. And most of his writing is about guys getting into some form of mystery, or they discover some kind of knowledge, and it drives them insane. And you know, in all the H.P. Lovecraft stories, how they start and how they end. A guy discovers something, and in the end, he's dead, or other people are dead. So that's pretty much like the basic structure of that. And as you see in the film, the end of the film is, of course, the more and more mad he gets, the more crazy he gets, the more he interprets the world in a way that you shouldn't probably do that. He sees like patterns where there probably are no patterns. I mean, I never explain it in the film, but you never know if any of the stuff that he talks about is really real, or it's all just in his head. So it could be a sci-fi horror film, but it also could be like a psychological drama, just of a person going mad and not being able to deal with his surrounding, with the people around him, with his sickness. And of course, he's a very nerdy character. Most of the stuff, I guess, that he says in the film is something that I would probably say. He's an atheist and I'm an atheist. So from the perspective of stuff that he says, most of the stuff is for me at least, is true. But of course, not in that context. And I think that is the big problem we have nowadays. And we also had that debate yesterday when we talked about identities, black identities, all kinds of identities, that people are in a strange way over identifying with something. For example, in my case, that guy is a very skeptical person. He loves science, and he thinks that there is no religion. There is, or there is of course religion, but he hates it. he hates the alchemists. In the beginning of the film, he like despises the alchemists and what they did because they don't do peer review, they don't exchange data, they are just like fumbling in the dark, as he says. But in the end, like the one guy who is fumbling very much in the dark is that guy. So it's also kind of like the story of a guy who was a non-believer and turned into a believer because he went through this like strange form of madness or like not being able to deal with the world. So the nerd in the beginning, where he's still kind of interested in the world and research and what other people think, and in the end he's not interested in that kind of stuff at all anymore. And I think that is what we see in the last couple of years with a lot of the nerd, let's call it the nerd controversies, Gamergate, and all that kind of stuff. It's always about people who don't want to hear the world anymore. They just want to hear themselves talk or hear themselves think in a way. So yeah, that's a little bit my interpretation of what what you have seen or what I tried to convey or try to do. And yes, it is true. It's also in the closing in the end title screens. I really only killed one animal in the making of this film, and it is an ant. I really, you see that, that's my finger. I crushed an ant and we filmed that. But for example, we didn't kill the slug because, I mean, you kind of probably got it that most of the stuff in the film I also kind of hate. I don't like to see blood. I don't like to see like the stuff that's in your ear. I hated slugs, for example. Like I was terrified of slugs. And I kind of put the slugs in the film because I kind of wanted to deal also with that trauma. And the thing was that we thought that we start shooting, and the film was, by the way, shot before COVID. It feels like a COVID film because it's only in one film, but we shot it in November and December 2019 before COVID even started. And we had a lot of time in the post-production. That's why the editing is very frenetic, I guess, at some point. And then we had a lot of time I had a lot of time sitting at home and editing this film. I guess you see that. But so when we started, we wanted to start shooting end of September. And my DOP, Florian Hofer, who is just brilliant. I really love him. I will not ever make another film with someone else. He's just like such a brilliant guy. And it's the first film I made with him. And I only knew him for half a year or like, I don't know, like a couple of months later. We started making this film. And so the thing is that we were planning to start filming end of September, but he got a really well-paid job. So we had to postpone the starting of the shooting until early November. But I already, of course, had a couple of people collect slugs for me. So I had like 20 or like 12 or so, something, I don't know. I had the slugs in a terrarium sitting at home. And I just wanted to film the thing and just like get rid of the fucking slugs. And what happened was that I had to take care of the slugs for 2 months. And after 3 days, they all had names. And I fed them the best things, you know, like strawberries and good salad and all the stuff. And they had a good life with me, the slugs. And of course, I didn't want, like, I was honestly considering to put real salt on the slug and film it. But when I was living with those slugs for 2 months, and after like 2 weeks, I could put them on my hands, and I really was petting the slugs, and I kind of found out that my skin got way better after I touched slugs. And I learned that in China, in creams, they actually use some of the secretes from slugs in hand creams and stuff like that. So my hand were really looking like 20 years younger when I was like handling the slugs and petting the slugs. Anyhow, so I didn't wanna kill the slug anymore, and so I had to go to this like chemist, like chemical like matter store in Vienna. So I went there and said like, excuse me, I need something that looks like salt crystals, but it can't be salt crystals, and it can't behave like salt crystals, and it can also not like draw like because the salt, like why slugs usually die is because there's so much water in them, and the salt is drawing the water out of the cells of the slug, and it's kind of like super dehydrates them. And I said like, I want something that looks like a salt but doesn't behave like a salt, like the table salt. And she like the person working there, she looked at me and said like, why do you, this is very unspecific. Why do you want that? And I said like, yeah, I want to put it on a slug, but the slug has to live and it has to look like it's salt. And she stared at me for a couple of seconds. I know exactly what you need. And then she gave me that thing. I don't even know by heart what kind of chemical it is. But then we put it on the slug. And of course, you see the slug wiggle around. Of course, the slug doesn't like it. I think none of us would like it that some random guy puts like weird shit on you and you're like, what is going on? I don't like this. So the slug was wiggling around, but it didn't really kill the slug. And in the end, when the slug stops moving, that's actually a digital effect. I kind of like slowed down the movement of the slug at one point, and then it doesn't move anymore, but that's a digital effect. So the slug did not die, and I put the slug back into the terrarium with its friends. And a week later, when we were sure that we shot everything, we put them in my garden where they still live and eat my strawberries or something like that. So, but yeah, that's the story of the slugs. And now, of course, I opened the questions to the auditorium. So if you have any questions, yeah, of course, Katharina.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot, actually, of Taxi Driver.
Well, that is a very nice comparison. Thank you so
No,
much.
but
Thank you.
the guy driving, no, the guy driving nuts in
Yeah.
this way because of society. At the time, it was the 70s, and he drove nuts because of of other stuff in society. But now, yeah, it's perhaps more the modern way then. Your psychopath is driving then in the total.
He's a more introvert character than the guy in Taxi Driver. The Taxi Driver guy is also introvert, but
Totally.
but he is a different kind of working class guy because he has to do the taxi driving and all that stuff, and he doesn't have that. Like he kind of
Yeah.
like takes himself out of that, like the
But
stupid IT job, and locks himself up. But yes, but thank you.
yeah, and yeah, because it was also this reference to the Iraq war and so on. So I was just thinking about it in a little bit in this way. But why you had to do this film actually?
Why
Why
did I?
about
Okay.
a psychopath really going deep into into his psychosis? It's crazy.
Because the strange thing is I know some of those thoughts, and I like it was kind of like
course.
amplifying what I think from every now and then, but amplifying it by 1,000 or something like that. So how would I be in a certain way if everything would be like if something would snap in the wrong direction and
Yeah,
kind
but
of like explore that?
yeah, okay, we would be all like this probably.
Probably, yeah.
But if we put
Like
it into
there
extremes.
is a Werner Herzog quote in the film. There is a thin layer of ice over a deep ocean of chaos. That's Werner Herzog, and of course I
Yeah.
put it in there. And it of course it's true. Yeah, that we would like do weird things if there would be no like societal balance or check and stuff like that. Yeah,
How
but yeah.
how was the reaction of the audience in Texas actually, because they are used to horror movies. For me, I'm like already. I'm not somebody who loves horror movies that much, or other kind of horror movies. I don't like splatter that much, but how they were reacting on this specific
So it's
movie.
interesting because I like from the reaction I got there, and also from the reviews that I read so far, and also reviews on like Letterboxd or IMDb stuff like that. I can kind of get, even if people kind of hate it and only give me like 1 or 5 stars or something, like on Letterboxd or something, yeah, where they just like write 2 lines. They said like, it was so weird. It was like, I thought I would stop it, but I couldn't stop. And then I watched it to the end, and then I was disappointed, but I will not get it out of my head anymore. Stuff like that. So there's something I think, even, of course, it is not a classic horror film. Usually in a classic, like splatter horror film, like after 10 minutes, you have like half-naked lady being cut into pieces by a knife or something like that. So that film, of course, doesn't work
I
like
was
that.
so
yeah.
much waiting for that, actually, but okay.
No, no, this is a slow burn. It's not a crowd pleaser. It's a crowd pisser. Yeah. And yeah, but I mean, what I really wanted to do is kind of like get the audience, because in the first half of the movie you kind of feel safe because there are things happening that are kind of not nice to look at, you know, like the clipping of the toenails on some of the stories or the earwax. There is stuff that is kind of like yucky or something like that, yeah. But it's not horror. It's kind of like yucky, yeah. And then kind of like it's kind of there's this exponential growth at the end where it's just like completely goes out of control. But what I wanted to do is kind of like bring all the people who watch the film on the same level and on the same speed as the protagonist. Kind of like the film always forces you to follow him and to kind of like slow down maybe and listen to him. Because I think the horror in the end works even better if you really listen to what he says. Of course, you can sometimes like drift off for 5 minutes and you probably haven't like lost a lot of information, but still there is valid information in there that kind of explains, at least for me, why he's like snapping in the end, or why that goes. But it's the basic idea was I wanted to tell the story of a nerd who is not interested in the world anymore, because that's what nerds usually, the positive nerds like that. They exchange with other people. They try to, their horizon is at least open. They want to know what new films are there, what new, I don't know, like whatever things they can discover, because they want to incorporate that into their knowledge and into their existence and lifestyle. And in that case, it's almost as if this horizon is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's almost like as if he's shutting down, and in a certain way he's almost like sinking into his desk. He's just like falling into his desk. Everything is magnified and big, and he's only seeing the stuff on his desk anymore and nothing else.
Yeah, one last question. Did you read books about, let's say,
Tinnitus?
psychologically sick people? I mean, there are those books where you have those people totally locked up in their own worlds and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously this was a psychopath, but you have also other pictures of sickness, of psychological sickness. And did you read those books? Did you prepare yourself on this? Yeah?
I did not that many. I read more stuff about tinnitus, and I did more interviews with people who have tinnitus about how tinnitus is for them and how it works and that kind of stuff. I had like, I don't know, like 20 or more script consultants, and I asked about many things about the tinnitus stuff, biological facts, all kinds of stuff. And one of the guys, I thought about that, and I thought like maybe I should read up in, you know, like clinical studies of psychopaths or something like that. I did that a little bit, but what I did is I gave the script when it was finished to a friend of mine who is a clinical psychiatrist, and I told him, please read this. I want your feedback. And he sent this like one line WhatsApp message where he said like, this is a classic psychopath. Like it's almost like you read one of our handbooks. I have nothing to add. Good work.
Yeah, that what I thought when I saw it. It was like reading a clinical
I didn't really
report.
get that much into the details of that. No. But I guess that's what I was like referring to in the beginning. If you read horror stories about people going mad, there are certain. It's almost like, I'm not even sure that film has a three act structure. I'm not even sure about that. But there is definitely a 3-act structure in the way that the guy deteriorates. That of course, yeah.
Okay, that were my questions. at
Wonderful.
least.
Yes.
Thank you for the movie. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to ask to what extent, or if it was inspirational for you, what people like, especially in the USA, deal with since Donald Trump, like echo chambers and social media, and was that actually an inspiration for you? I don't know, because I see parallels getting lost in the world and social media and finding allies on the internet, and you know what. I wonder if that was also an inspiration.
Oh yeah. That was definitely like, it was not so much a big chunk of the thing that I wanted. It's definitely in there. So when he tries to communicate his stuff and everybody pretty much like on the internet laughs at him, I kind of turned it around, because usually echo chambers work that someone proclaims something idiotic, like QAnon or something like that, and people congregate and amplify that message. In my case, I kind of did the other way around, that there's a guy posting stuff about his life on YouTube or other platforms. You never really learn that, but people are kind of laughing at him and not taking him serious, or it's so far out, it doesn't really fit one of the bubbles. That's why nobody's talking to him, except like one guy then he finds, and like Sammy falls in love with him, and then that guy is like some stupid troll making fun of him. So it is definitely in there. Of course, I mean, you cannot write a story like this anymore in 2019, 2020, 2021 without having that in mind, how people communicate online and how those echo chambers work. But yes, I didn't want to put like a whole lot of emphasis on it, but I thought when I wrote the thing, it has to be in there. And the whole thing with him being alone and being queer and having a trauma from that anyways, and then he finds someone online. So I kind of thought, that might be a good idea of like how to incorporate that level of like how trolls behave online. Yeah.
Johannes, I have a question as well. First of all, I really like the claustrophobic visual quality of the movie, which really has a very good impact. And you being a Viennese Austrian, I wonder whether you refer to the whole artistic history of Otto Mühl, Hermann Nietzsche, Schwarzkogler. I saw this kind of whole Austrian, whatever, psycho artistic
So the Viennese
world,
actionists, yes,
interpreted in a certain way, or even kind of extended into this kind of
it's fun. Like it's one of the
movie.
first remarks I heard when the movie stopped. That Sandra Mann said like, you're going through your trauma of Viennese actionism or something like that. Yeah, in a certain way, I guess like most splatter films, you could say that. Yeah, but it's true. Of course, I'm from Vienna, and the question is I totally get it. In fact, in the very end, when it's getting very cut-uppy and very fast, there are a couple of Nietzsche paintings in the cut-up scenes, only for like really like 4 or 5 frames at times. So there is some Nietzsche in the film actually. So like, I definitely wanted to do that. I wouldn't say that it is something that kind of like on the visual level that I said like I want to recreate kind of like the visual aesthetics of the Viennese actionists in a horror film. But I mean, it's definitely true that there is a certain form of DNA of Viennese experimental film in there, like Kurt Kren and those guys who did a lot of very fast, very cut-uppy videos in the 60s and 70s. Up until now, there's a lot of like experimental film tradition in Austria. And when I was working and working on the editing and stuff, and kind of had to find a pacing for the whole thing. So how can this escalate? I thought like in the very end, it almost should feel like one of these like experimental like Kurt Kren films on 8mm from the 60s or something like that. I was definitely going into that direction, and and in a certain way, I mean, the main problem with horror film most of the time is that horror in general is a very experimental and progressive genre when it is dealing with visuals. But most of the time, horror films, the story of horror films are very reactionary and very conservative. Most of the time, it's about people start believing in something supernatural, or people like so like there is the narrative quality of horror films is usually very conservative, and the visual elements are usually very upfront. And there are horror films in the history of horror films who changed the aesthetic of movies in general, because you could try things in horror films that you couldn't do in other films, and some of these aesthetics then made it into other films. For example, a good example is like the first couple of minutes of Seven in the 1990s, where the opening segment of Seven is such an incredibly layered and great collage, almost like an experimental film, and the rest of the film is not referencing to that anymore. It's just like the opening sequence. But that opening sequence and what that did for other films is quite astonishing, I find, because now it's quite normal that you have almost like an experimental film in every title sequence of every stupid Marvel blockbuster that is very fast and very like evocative. And I think that horror has a tradition of trying things out, and other genres of film kind of like emulate that or try it. And to a certain degree, I also, I guess, wanted to do that. I wanted to do a genre film because it's definitely a horror genre film, but also the way how I tell it is, of course, very experimental. You would normally not do that. And that's the one thing I heard at Fantastic Fest and in most of the reviews. I hear that, oh, I did not expect this. I have never seen something like that. And it's for me, it's crazy that people have not seen something like that, because I know a lot about experimental film and how it works. But of course, I mean, I can't assume that people who like genre films, who like splatter films, slasher films, who go to Fantastic Fest or watch horror films or genre films, that they know the history of, I don't know, like experimental films and stuff like that. So it's super interesting for me to see that, like, they tell me that I did something completely new. And I said, like, no, I didn't do something completely new. I took aesthetics out of other genres and put them into a horror film. And of course, I did things that probably have not been done before in that way. But I wouldn't say that I'm revolutionary about that. But it seems like in certain areas and in certain forms of genres, something like, there's one guy, and I still can't believe that he wrote it. There's this horror film magazine, and the reviewer wrote that every 10 years there is one horror film coming out that kind of redefines the genre. And he, for example, quotes like Blair Witch Project, like in the late 90s. And he says that my film is the thing of now. And I couldn't even believe that, like that someone would write that, because that's of course incredibly flattering that someone would say that I am the I made the genre-defying film of the 20s in horror for 20,000 euros in my apartment. But I mean, if someone writes that and believes that, I'll take it as a compliment. What can I say? But in general, I think that's also a question that pretty much like you asked, Katharina, is. Most people in the genre field are trying to wrap their heads around the film and don't really know where to put it, and are kind of flabbergasted by it, but also mesmerized. And I like that. I like that.
Thank you, Johannes.
So, this is a great moment. You're in front of the camera and I'm behind it again.
Yes, yes, yes. But usually you are in front of the camera as well, but you turn yourself off in the moderation.
I'm turned off. So, one thing many people get wrong for of us nerds is that we don't collect stuff. We collect it, but we collect knowledge. Why we want
And
to
memories.
yeah, and memories.
yeah.
Why we want to alienate our friends or anyone we know. And Some people are total maniacs and go and become film producers and alienate others with movies.
Not only alienate, do way more. Yeah.
So my first question is, how time consuming was the getting all the informations you needed for this movie compared to your others, and have COVID besides you, which were directly influencing your thoughts for this movie because everyone got isolated.
Oh, so yeah, I wrote the film with help from Samantha in I guess March, April, May, June 2019, and worked over it one more time or twice before we started shooting in November. But that, like, none of COVID could not have influenced me writing that thing because COVID hasn't happened yet, hadn't happened yet back then. I did a little bit of changing. What happened was that I wanted to go on an airplane and fly to LA on the 17th of March 2020 to meet Ethan. Ethan is the voice of the film. And I'm very glad that I got him because I, like, the one problem I had, I knew it would be super cheap and easy for me to shoot all of that stuff with Florian and Yasmin in my apartment. I kind of like took one room in my apartment, changed it into the horror kammer, the horror chamber, and then I left it there. And over, like, I don't know, like 3-4 months, we shot there every second day, 2 hours of shooting, then like maybe 2 days nothing, then another hour of shooting. So whenever there was time for me and time for Flo, we created like another scene and filmed that. So that all happened before COVID. And then, of course, because I had a very detailed script, I knew that I wouldn't find someone in Austria with that specific voice that I was looking for. And so I contacted a friend of mine, and he recommended a friend of his in LA who is a good casting agent. And I contacted her, and she said, we can work on that. Anyways, I like working with indie productions anyways. We can make a deal. You don't have to pay me. But I would like also to co-produce the film and help you with the LA side. So if you're happy with that, and so that's how Julianne Gabert, who was my casting director, also became one of my co-producers, and she was dealing with all the LA stuff, and she did the casting. She sent me 200 voices, and I listened to 200 nerdy voices, and I thought I'd die. All these voices, and most of them were like, if people try to portray nerds or have nerdy voices, it's always like it's always like a little bit squeaky. And I knew that that's a film about a guy who needs to mesmerize you. You kind of want, even if you hate the guy, you kind of want to listen to him because there's something strange in his voice. There's something alluring in his voice. So I needed a very specific voice. And of the 200 voices, I listened to most of them once or twice, but it was clear there were like 2 or 3 voices left. And out of the 3 voices left, there wasn't even a big debate. I showed like the recordings to a couple of friends, but it was already clear that Ethan Haslam, who became the voice, would be that voice. And in the very beginning, you kind of, if you know me, you kind of know that I'm the guy because of, you know, like how I look like. In the very beginning, when we started shooting, we were planning to show even less of me, mostly only hands or really kind of abstract patterns of his shirts and stuff like that. But while shooting, we realized it will be 60-70% macro shots anyways, but we need some more establishing things where you see a little bit more of him. You see his hair, maybe you see parts of his face from behind. And when we shot that, I thought, like, yeah, people will probably realize that's me, and that they will probably, if they know me, realize that's not my voice. But then again, I thought, like, how many people do really know me? How many people will watch this film, hopefully, and not know how I talk and how I look like, and how I like talk with my hands and stuff like that. But I tried to kind of like also kind of like play a character a little bit that is not myself. So then we wanted to record the whole thing, and on the 17th of March, I wanted to get myself onto a plane, fly to LA, be there for a week, record all that stuff with Ethan in a studio, and then fly back and do the editing. But then COVID happened. My flight was cancelled. It was the first day of the travel ban to the US, and I was kind of locked up in my room. And it ended up, that part, the post-production part, was very COVID. The post-production part was that I was on Zoom connected to LA, to a recording studio in LA, and I was directing Ethan via Zoom, and he was sitting in a recording studio in LA and recording all the voices in good quality, and I was sitting, we started recording 12 noon, not 12 noon, 12 midnight. We started recording 12 midnight and recorded until 7 o'clock in the morning, because that was easier for him and for the recording studio. And and then so my direction was via Zoom. And that was kind of awkward, but it was also nice. And now in the summertime, when I was there for the first time after the whole thing, I first met most of the people in person. I met Julianne in person, the casting director and co-producer. I met Ethan in person, and some of the people in LA, the sound producers and all those guys. That was weird. Already having a finished film and submitted it to all the film festivals and everything, and then kind of like meeting the people for the first time that I made the film with. It's in person. That was weird. And Samantha, who wrote the thing with me, or did like a lot of input concerning the Lovecraftian elements and all that stuff, I have never seen her face before. And we have the joke now on Facebook when we chat with each other, we will keep that until I finally get my ass over to Pennsylvania for the next time, and then we'll meet in person for dinner. That's the plan.
A second question I have in mind is a bad thing to do is studying typography. You can't go and walk around in this world anymore. So if you, like example, you see Comic Sans, this is the usual case.
Impact. We talked about Impact with Sandra today, yes.
You're gonna
Comic
murder
Sans.
somebody.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Yeah.
And you did I think a worse scenario. You're gone there and becoming a sound expert. So it's not like you're hearing the Wilhelm scream and okay, I know that feeling. But you are now totally into it that you can hear some difference in sounds, which gonna annoy you, which you want, and so on.
Yeah.
How much does it affect your life now?
Because I dug so deep into, well, this that's hard, because I mean I talk to many people who have tinnitus, and I had tinnitus for 10 minutes in my life. I kind of know how that feels, but gladly it went away. But so I can kind of like associate with it a little bit. But I mean it is hard for me to say like I feel like those people who have tinnitus. This is just like, that's impossible for me. But sound-wise, Lenya Gartmann did the sound design of the film. So there were two parts of people helping me with the sound. There's Lenya Gartmann, who is a brilliant sound designer, working in Vienna. She's from Germany, but she lives in Vienna and does brilliant sound design. And for example, we never recorded any. We didn't have a microphone recording any of the shots. There was no microphone around. She did the entire soundscape. Every little like eggshell cracking, every little moving of a cigarette, everything, she did all of that in post. That's all Foley. She pretty much recreated my crazy horror chamber in her studio, and she took pictures while she was recreating all those sounds. And it really almost looked like the film. All this like weird stuff and glue and this and that and some of the stuff that she had to do to get the perfect sound was even more nasty, I guess, than some of the things that you see in the film. She did not kill people. She did not kill people. She's vegetarian. No, she did not do that. and the other part of the sound design is Tina 303, Tina 303. She is at least in Austria, very well-known techno musician and house musician. And we met in person for the first time a couple of years ago, but we know of each other for like 30 years because she was always part of the Viennese electronic musician scene. And so we ran into each other, like we had some drinks, and then she invited me to DJ with her, which was really fun. And at some point I said, like, the next movie I'm gonna make, you'll do the soundtrack. And I didn't even know it would be that film. And then I came back to her and said, like, hey, I want to do this film about the guy who has tinnitus and goes insane because of the sound. And she said, like, I have tinnitus. Perfect. And what she did is she set up pretty much like one Korg MS-20 synthesizer. And she watched the film like 4 times. And she kind of live scored with this one synthesizer the film like 4 times, and we kind of mixed those 4 recordings of the MS-20 and mixed all of that with the Foley and the sound design that Lenya did, and also the crazy creepy things that Lenya already put into the thing. And that's why it kind of has this like multi-layered feeling of many things that, and sometimes you hear that there's something that really sounds like a synthesizer, and it is a synthesizer because it's a Korg MS-20, but sometimes it deteriorates and is more like a frickle frackle kind of thing, more like industrial or something, I don't know. But I'm very glad that I got those nice people on board, which makes it a very female production, because my co-writer was female, the sound designer was female, 2 of the co-producers are female, the score was done by a female. So we have a pretty good, like, I think we have in the core departments more women than men in this film. Yeah. I think, are we done? Yes, we're done. I talk so much. I'll do that. Thank you. I'll do that in German, because my grandmother, before she died, she always said, like, "Wann du mal stirbst, müssen der Goschen extra da schlagen." And it is true. I'm gonna punch my mouth to death now with a beer. Good night.